A 4-sentence text message tore apart 40 years of motherhood. That night, instead of weeping, I opened my safe, turned on my computer, and began rewriting my life. By the time the sun came up, my daughter had vanished, and this 62-year-old mother had transformed into someone no one could ever joke with again. I stared at the glowing screen one last time. "We are done with you. My name is Margaret O'Connor, but everyone calls me Maggie. I am 62 years old. A woman of Irish descent, with hands that have known the rough texture of soil and the slick surface of counting money for decades. I live in a quiet, upscale subdivision outside Denver, where the mountains loom large and silent against the western horizon. To the outside world, I am a success story. I own Green Nest Market, a chain of organic grocery stores that started as a roadside stand and grew into a local empire. People see the clean balance sheets and the polished floors, but they do not see the hollow ache that has lived in my chest for 7 years. My life has a rhythm, steady and predictable. But the silence in this big house is loud. It has been that way since Patrick died. My husband. My partner in everything, until a massive stroke took him on a Tuesday morning. I still remember the antiseptic smell of the hospital room and the way his grip tightened on my hand one last time. His voice was barely a whisper, forcing the words out through the fog of approaching death. "Maggie, when Lily marries, give her the start we never had." He had rasped, his eyes watering with urgency. "Do not spare a thing." That sentence had become my scripture. It was the last command of a dying king, and I was his loyal soldier. We had 2 children, but in my heart, the scales had always tipped, shamefully and secretly, toward Lily. She was 34 now, working in marketing down in Austin, Texas. She was my porcelain doll, the one who always seemed to need the extra layer of bubble wrap to survive the world. Then there was Noah, 31, a high school history teacher who lived just 20 minutes away here in Colorado. Noah was steady. Noah was like the oak tree in the backyard that survived every winter storm without needing a stake to hold it up. I loved him. Of course I did. But I assumed he did not need me the way Lily did. That assumption was a rot I did not smell until it was too late. When Lily called to tell me she was engaged, her voice was breathless. Lucas Hart was his name. He was 38, a financial expert with a smile that looked good on social media and a handshake that felt just firm enough to be reassuring. He knew exactly what to say to a widowed mother. He called me Mom and asked about the organic produce business with a feigned intensity that I mistook for respect. I promised to take care of her. "Maggie, she means the world to me," he had said over FaceTime, his arm draped possessively over my daughter's shoulder. I believed him. To honor Patrick, I decided to unveil the grandest gesture of my life. I found a property in the rolling hills outside Austin. It was a sprawling modern farmhouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and an open-concept kitchen that Lily had pinned on her vision board. The price tag was over $600,000. I did not blink. I instructed the real estate agent to prepare the paperwork to put the deed in both Lily and Lucas's names. It was to be a wedding gift, a nest egg, a fortress against the hard world Patrick and I had fought so hard to conquer. As I sat in my living room, surrounded by piles of glossy wedding catalogues, fabric swatches, and catering menus, I felt the ghost of my husband beside me. I remembered the nights we spent eating cold sandwiches in the back of our first store, counting crumpled $1 bills and dreaming of a day when we would not have to check the price of milk. We had scraped and saved so our children would never know that hunger. I ran my hand over a heavy cardstock invitation sample. This wedding would be the coronation of all that labor. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight. The house was silent. My eyes burned from reading fine print on floral contracts and email quotes for imported wine. I looked at the photo of the model home in Austin, taped to the refrigerator door. I was exhausted. My back ached, and my bank account was about to bleed a significant fortune. Yet, a smile touched my lips. I was doing it. I was keeping the promise. I was the good mother, the provider, the rock. I had no idea that I was actually the architect of my own destruction. The uneasiness did not arrive all at once like a storm. It crept in slowly, like a draft through a cracked window that you only notice when the room goes cold. It started with Lucas's jokes. In the beginning, his comments about my financial stability seemed charming, a way of acknowledging my hard work. But as the weeks went by, the tone shifted. During Sunday dinner, while he poured expensive wine into my crystal glasses, he grinned at me across the roast chicken. You know, Maggie. Most guys worry about their in-laws becoming a burden. But me, with a future mother-in-law of your stature, I am set for life. Right. He laughed, a loud, booming sound that demanded everyone else join in. I forced a smile, but the wine suddenly tasted like vinegar. It felt less like a compliment and more like an appraisal. Noah noticed it too. My son sat quietly, pushing peas around his plate, his eyes narrowing every time Lucas opened his mouth. Later, while helping me clear the table, Noah leaned in close. Mum, have you noticed he never talks about his job? It is always about student loans, the housing market bubble, or some investment opportunity that he just needs capital for. It is like he is interviewing your bank account, not dating your daughter. You are being cynical. Noah, I snapped, scrubbing a plate harder than necessary. He is a financial expert. That is just how his mind works. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The next morning, I drove to the stately brick house of Elaine Brooks. Elaine was a retired lawyer who had helped me incorporate Green Nest Market 30 years ago. She was sharp, unsentimental, and the only person I trusted to tell me the brutal truth. I sat in her study, twisting my wedding ring. I want to transfer the title of the Austin house to them, and I want to make sure Lily is secure. Elaine took off her reading glasses and looked at me with steel-grey eyes. Secure is good. Maggie, vulnerable is not. If you are handing over a $600,000 property, you do it on your terms. She advised me to set up a trust. It would hold the title to the new house, my business shares, and my savings. The terms were specific. The assets would only remain accessible if there was a healthy family relationship based on mutual respect. It sounds harsh. Elaine, I said, hesitating. It is not harsh. It is a seatbelt, Elaine replied, tapping her pen on the desk. And we are adding a clause. Any major gift, like this house, can be revoked right up until the final second of the legal transfer. If things go south before the ink is dry, you pull the plug. I signed the papers, telling myself I would never have to use them. Before I left, Elaine stopped me. One more thing, she said, her voice dropping. Install cameras, kitchen, living room, back porch. Get the ones that record audio. Elaine. I gasped. That is paranoid. This is my family. My nephew embezzled $50,000 from my sister while living in her basement, Elaine said flatly. He called her sweet names to her face, and robbed her blind while she slept. Get the cameras. Call it security. Call it peace of mind. Just do it. I eventually agreed, mostly to stop her nagging. A week later, discreet sensors were installed in the molding of my ceiling. I told myself they were for burglars. But then came the weekend visit. Lily and Lucas were staying over to finalize the wedding guest list. I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water and stopped just outside the doorway. They were standing by the island. I mentioned the closing date for the Austin house was coming up in 10 days. Lucas looked at Lily. He did not smile. He winked. It was a slow, deliberate wink, followed by a smirk that vanished the moment he saw me enter. Lily quickly looked down at the granite countertop, avoiding my eyes. We are just so grateful. Mum, Lily mumbled, her voice tight. The air felt heavy. Later that afternoon, Noah cornered me in the hallway. Mum. Please do not sign those papers yet, he whispered, his hands shaking slightly. Something is wrong. He is calculating. I see the way he looks at this house. He is counting the square footage. Stop it. Noah, I hissed, pulling my arm away. You are jealous because your sister is getting the big wedding and the new life. Be happy for her. Noah looked at me with a hurt expression that I would remember for the rest of my life. I am not jealous. Mum, I am scared for you. I turned my back on him. I was determined to be the generous matriarch, the woman who kept her promise to her dead husband. I did not want to see the cracks in the foundation, so I simply closed my eyes. The wedding took place at an exclusive resort nestled along the shores of a private lake just outside Austin. It was a spectacle of excess that I had paid for with a smile. The guest list had swelled to over 250 people, most of them strangers to me. They were colleagues from Lucas's investment firm, Lily's friends from the marketing world, and a sea of young, ambitious faces that looked like they belonged in a fashion magazine. I had signed checks for everything without hesitation. The flowers were rare orchids flown in from South America. The band was a 12-piece ensemble that cost more than my first car. There was a private bartender for the VIP section and a photo booth that printed instant keepsakes on heavy, gold-leafed paper. As I walked through the ballroom before the guests arrived, running my hand over the silk tablecloths, I whispered to the empty air, Patrick, I hope you are seeing this. We did it. But the tension was already vibrating beneath the polished surface. Just an hour before the ceremony, I found Noah and Lily arguing in the bridal suite corridor. Noah looked uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo, his face flushed. Lily. I just need to know, Noah said, his voice low and urgent. Do you actually love him, or do you just love the upgrade? The lifestyle Lily spun around, her eyes flashing with a cold fire I had rarely seen. Stop it. Noah. Do not dare ruin this day for me. You are just bitter because you are still grading papers in a dusty classroom while I am moving up. Get out of my face. She slammed the door, leaving Noah standing there looking defeated. I wanted to intervene, but the music started. The ceremony itself was a blur of perfection. Lucas stood at the altar looking like a movie star. He recited vows that were poetic and tender, his voice cracking with practiced emotion. When Lily wiped a tear from her cheek, I felt my own defenses crumble. I wept openly in the front row, clutching a lace handkerchief. I scolded myself for my earlier paranoia. I told myself that Elaine was wrong, that Noah was wrong, and that I was just a suspicious old woman who had forgotten what young love looked like. Then came the reception. The sun went down, and the lights dimmed. The wine flowed like water, and the noise level rose to a deafening roar. It was time for the speeches. Noah went first. He stood awkwardly with the microphone, his hand shaking slightly. He spoke about growing up with Lily, about how she used to protect him from neighborhood bullies. It was simple, clumsy, and deeply sincere. I just want my sister to be happy. That is all. Noah stammered, raising his glass. Behind me, at a table full of Lucas's friends, I heard a stifled snicker. Someone whispered loudly enough for me to hear. Riveting stuff. Can we get back to the open bar? My face burned for my son. But before I could turn around, Lucas grabbed the microphone from the MC. He had loosened his tie, his face flushed with drink and adrenaline. He flashed that $1,000,000 smile, commanding the room's attention. Thank you, Noah. Short and sweet, Lucas said, dismissing him with a wave. But folks, I need to make a special toast to my mother-in-law, Maggie. The room went quiet. I sat up straighter, touching my chest, expecting a moment of gratitude. Lucas chuckled into the mic, pacing the stage. You guys have no idea. This woman, she is intense. I mean, the emails, I have never seen someone care so much about napkin rings. But hey. He paused, looking directly at me with eyes that were glazed and cruel. It is not every day in your life that you find a lonely old woman who is ready to write checks to buy affection from one generation to the next. Right, everyone. For a second, there was a horrified silence. The insult hung in the air, heavy and toxic. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my body was frozen. Then, it happened. A group of Lucas's friends at the back table erupted into laughter. It was a drunk, raucous sound. Slowly, others joined in, an awkward, nervous laughter spreading through the room to diffuse the tension. I turned my head slowly, desperate for an ally. I looked at Lily. She was standing next to Lucas. She was not shouting at him. She was not grabbing the microphone to defend me. A videographer nearby captured the moment perfectly. Lily covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She leaned into Lucas, nudged his arm playfully, and whispered something into his ear before throwing her head back to laugh with him. I stared at her, the daughter I had worshipped, the child I was about to give a $600,000 home to. In that split second, the veil was ripped away. I saw the complicity in her eyes. I was not the beloved matriarch. I was not the respected mother. To them, I was just a walking bank account, a punchline that had paid for its own humiliation. The laughter was still rolling through the banquet hall like a physical wave, crashing against my back. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I simply stood up, smoothing the wrinkles on my silk dress with a hand that felt like it belonged to a stranger. Noah looked up at me, his eyes wide with panic and second-hand humiliation. He started to rise, his mouth opening to say something, but I placed a firm hand on his shoulder to stop him. I need to go outside and breathe for a moment, I said. My voice was low, devoid of the tremor that was shaking my insides. I turned and walked out. I kept my chin high, passing the tables of Lucas's smirking colleagues and the confused faces of my own relatives. I pushed through the heavy double doors into the cool night air of the parking lot. The bass of the music throbbed against the walls, but out here, the silence was absolute. I climbed into the driver's seat of my car and locked the doors. For a moment, my hands shook so violently that I could not grip the steering wheel. My instinct, honed over 34 years of motherhood, was to pick up my phone and call Lily. I wanted to demand an explanation. I wanted to hear her say it was a mistake, a joke gone wrong. Anything to patch the hole that had just been blown through my chest. I even dialed the first 3 digits of her number. Then, I stopped. I looked at the screen, glowing in the dark car. Any apology she gave me tonight would be damage control. It would be a lie designed to keep the checks clearing. I deleted the numbers. Instead, I opened my messages and typed a text to Elaine. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock in the morning, at your old office. Bring the trust file and the papers for the Austin house. I sent it, threw the phone onto the passenger seat, and drove. I did not go home. I drove to a hotel downtown, checked into a room on the 12th floor, and turned off my phone. The room was cold and impersonal, exactly what I needed. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. The tears I expected did not come. Instead, a strange, icy clarity settled over me. I pulled up the digital files for the house purchase. I scanned the dates. We were scheduled to close in 3 days. The money was in escrow, pending the final signature. I reread the clause Elaine had insisted on, the one about bad faith and the right to revoke gifts prior to transfer. It was all there. I had 72 hours to detonate their future. But I needed to be sure. I needed to know if tonight was just a drunken slip or the unveiling of a long con. I opened the security app for my home in Denver. I had not looked at the feeds in months, respecting their privacy during their visits. Now, I scrolled back through the timeline. I found a timestamp from 3 weeks ago. Lily and Lucas had come over for dinner to discuss the seating chart. I remembered that night. I had gone to bed early with a migraine, leaving them downstairs to finish a bottle of wine. I clicked play. The camera in the kitchen provided a crisp, high-definition view. Lucas was leaning against the counter, swirling a glass of red wine. Lily was by the sink, rinsing a glass. Lucas, are you sure? Mum does not suspect anything, Lily asked, her voice low, on the screen. Lucas laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. Babe, please. She is desperate to not die alone. Just give her the feeling of a perfect family, that house. Consider it the fee for enduring her boring stories. I sat in the hotel room, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face, and felt my heart turn to stone. Lily did not defend me. On the screen, she frowned for a second, then let out a sigh that turned into a giggle. She is a lot, I know. God, she's such a lonely old woman sometimes. The phrase hit me like a physical slap. It was the exact same phrase Lucas had used on the microphone tonight. Lonely old woman. They had rehearsed this. This was their inside joke, their bonding ritual mocking the donor who funded their lifestyle. I kept watching. I spent the entire night clicking through file after file. I listened to Lily complain to Lucas that I was controlling, but at least she has money. I listened to Lucas tell her that they needed to pressure her to sign the deed early, before she changes her mind. Then, I found the final dagger, a clip from just 2 days before the wedding. Lucas was whispering to Lily on the back porch. Once the house is ours, we need to start cutting Noah out. He is going to be a problem. We cannot have him sniffing around the inheritance. We need to make sure he stays in his lane. I closed the laptop. The sun was starting to bleed through the curtains, painting the room in shades of grey. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sleeping city. The mother who had walked into that wedding hall yesterday was dead. She had died the moment the laughter started. The woman standing in the hotel room now was something else entirely. I was no longer a victim. I was the CEO of my own life again, and I was about to conduct the most ruthless business transaction of my career. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the air in Elaine's office smelled of stale coffee and old law books. I sat in the leather chair opposite her, my laptop open on her mahogany desk. I did not say a word. I simply pressed the spacebar. The room filled with the tinny, recorded voices of my daughter and her fiancé. We listened to Lucas call me a lonely old woman. We listened to Lily laugh. We listened to the plan to cut Noah out of the inheritance. When the audio finished, silence hung heavy in the room. Elaine took off her glasses. For a moment, she looked like my friend, her eyes filled with pity. Then, she put her glasses back on, and the friend vanished. The lawyer appeared. "This is actionable," Elaine said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. "You have signage in your home warning that security recording is in progress." "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "In the entryway and the back porch. You told me to put them up years ago." "Good. That makes these admissible as proof of character and intent, not illegal wiretapping," Elaine said, scribbling furiously. "We are going to trigger the bad faith clause on the house purchase. We are citing emotional manipulation and abuse of trust to secure assets." I nodded. She slid a document across the desk. It was the cancellation order for the Austin property. The $600,000 sitting in escrow would be frozen. I signed my name at the bottom. The scratch of the pen against the paper sounded like a guillotine dropping. "Next," Elaine said, opening a thick file folder. "The trust." We spent the next 2 hours surgically removing Lily from my financial future. We slashed her share of the inheritance down to a fraction and moved the bulk of the estate to Noah. But Elaine went further. She drafted a new clause stating that any beneficiary must demonstrate a history of non-abusive and respectful conduct toward the grantor to receive a single dime. "If they want to fight this, they will have to prove in court that they did not mock you while plotting to steal your money," Elaine said, tapping the paper. "And we have the tapes to prove they did," while she filed the paperwork. I authorized a rush payment to a private investigator Elaine knew. I wanted to know exactly who Lucas Hart was. The report came back before lunch. It was thin but damning. Lucas had been involved in an investment fraud scheme in Arizona 4 years ago. It had been settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement and a large fine, keeping it out of the major papers. But the trail was there. He was not just cruel. He was a con artist who had found a new mark in my daughter. "He is desperate for capital," Elaine mused, reading the report. "That is why he was pushing for the house title so fast. He probably intended to borrow against it the moment the ink was dry." Before I left, Elaine handed me a small box. "Install this in the living room. It is a high-definition camera with a directional microphone. When they find out the house sale is blocked, they are going to come for you. I want every word recorded." I took the box. Then, I pulled a piece of heavy cream stationery from my purse and wrote a short note. "Elaine, please send this to Lily via courier tomorrow. Not today. I want them to sweat." The note was brief. I need time. "All financial agreements and property transfers are paused. until I feel there is a minimum level of mutual respect in this family. I did not mention the recordings. I did not mention the wedding speech. I gave them nothing to latch onto. I walked out to my car. The midday sun was blinding. I unlocked my phone for the first time since the night before. The screen flooded with notifications. There were dozens of missed calls from Lily. The voicemails were a frantic mix of gaslighting and demand. Mom. Lucas was just joking. Lily's voice whined in one message. You are being so sensitive. You are ruining everything over a toast. Then a text from Lucas. We need to talk like adults. Stop acting like a child and answer the phone. I looked at the messages. Yesterday. These words would have made me cry. They would have made me rush to apologize, to smooth things over, to open my checkbook just to buy peace. Today, I felt nothing. I silenced the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I put the car in gear and drove toward the mountains. I could feel a layer of thin, fragile skin peeling away from my soul, leaving something harder and colder underneath. I was done being the victim. The war had begun, and they did not even know they were already losing. 2 days after the bank cancelled the appointment to sign the house deed, the silence in my home was shattered. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The doorbell rang not once, but in a rapid, aggressive staccato that echoed through the hallway. Then came the pounding on the heavy oak door. Maggie. Open this door. We need to talk like adults. Lucas's voice boomed from the porch, muffled but clearly furious. I stood in the hallway, smoothing down the front of my cardigan. I was perfectly calm. I checked my watch. Noah was already positioned in the kitchen, sitting on a stool with a clear line of sight, instructed to stay hidden unless things became physical. I walked to the door and unlocked it. Lucas stood there. His face flushed a deep, ugly red. Lily was behind him, looking pale and chewing on her thumbnail. Come in, I said. Stepping aside, they marched into the living room. This was the trap I had set. The new high-definition camera with the directional microphone was blinking silently on the bookshelf, nestled between 2 encyclopedias. Lucas did not sit down. He paced the rug, pointing a finger at me. You have some nerve, Maggie. He spat, his voice shaking with rage. You promised us that house. You put it in writing. Do you have any idea what you have done? You are playing games with our financial future. He took a step closer, looming over me. This is about control, isn't it? You cannot stand that Lily is independent, so you dangle money over her head like a carrot. You are sick. I looked at Lily. She stood by the fireplace, refusing to meet my eyes. She did not tell him to stop. She did not defend the mother who had paid for her college, her car, and her wedding. She just let him scream. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply picked up the television remote from the side table. I am not controlling you. Lucas? I am just listening, I said softly. I pressed the power button. The 60-inch screen flared to life. The video I had queued up played instantly. It was the footage from my kitchen, 3 weeks ago. The audio was crystal clear. She is desperate to not die alone. Babe, the digital Lucas on the screen said, his voice dripping with condescension. Just give her the feeling of a perfect family. That house. Consider it the fee for enduring her boring stories. In the living room, the real Lucas froze. His mouth hung open, on the screen. Lily's giggle bubbled up, followed by her voice. God, she is such a lonely old woman sometimes. I pressed pause. The image of their sneering faces froze on the screen, towering over us. Lily turned the color of ash. Lucas blinked rapidly, his arrogance momentarily punctured. Then, his eyes narrowed, and he pivoted to attack. You recorded us, he stammered, his face twisting. That is illegal. You are spying on guests in your own home. That is psychotic. You are just like those creepy people in documentaries who watch people sleep. I walked over to the corner of the room and pointed to a small, brass-framed sign hanging near the entryway. It had been there for 5 years. Read it. Lucas, I said, my voice cold and steady. Security recording in progress. This is my home, my private property. My lawyer advised me to install these years ago for my own protection. It turns out she was right. I picked up the file folder lying on the coffee table. I have updated my trust. I announced, opening the document. As of this morning, Lily, you are no longer the primary beneficiary. The Austin House transaction has been permanently voided due to bad faith negotiation, and if you attempt to sue me or challenge this trust, my lawyer is prepared to release hours of audio and video footage proving your intent to defraud and emotionally abuse a senior citizen. Lily burst into tears. It was a loud, wailing sound. Mum, she sobbed, her hands shaking. How could you? We were just venting. It was a joke. You care more about your money and your stupid lawyers than you care about me. You have destroyed this whole family over nothing. Lucas slammed his hand down on my coffee table, making the vase jump. You will regret this, he snarled, leaning into my face. His teeth bared. You think you can humiliate me. I will make sure everyone knows what a bitter, vindictive hag you are. You will be truly alone when I am done with you. I did not flinch. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had memorized. I put it on speaker. Hello? This is Officer Miller? A deep voice answered. It was Jim Miller, the police captain who bought his organic vegetables from my market every Sunday. Jim, it is Maggie O'Connor, I said, looking Lucas dead in the eye. I have 2 intruders in my home who are becoming aggressive and threatening me. I have everything on camera. I need a patrol car at my address immediately. I am on my way. Maggie. Jim's voice crackled with authority. Lucas went white. The name of the police captain was enough. The fight drained out of him instantly, replaced by the primitive urge to run. You are crazy, he muttered, backing away toward the door. He grabbed Lily's arm roughly. Come on, let's go. She's not worth it. He dragged her out the front door. Lily stumbled, still sobbing, looking back at me one last time, but she let him pull her away. As they reached the driveway, I heard Lucas screaming obscenities into the afternoon air. I closed the door and locked it. My hands were finally steady. The house was quiet again. But this time, the silence did not feel empty. It felt clean. That evening, the silence in my dining room was absolute. I sat alone at the mahogany table where we had celebrated so many Thanksgivings, staring at a bowl of cold soup. My phone buzzed against the wood, a harsh, vibrating sound that made me flinch. It was a text message from Lily. It was a long block of grey text, but the opening line hit me with the force of a physical blow. We are done with you. Do not ever find us again. I picked up the phone, my fingers cold. I read on. Lily had poured a lifetime of resentment into a few glowing pixels. She declared that she and Lucas were going to build a life completely independent of my toxic influence. She wrote that, from this moment on, I was just a stranger to her, a stranger who had selfishly destroyed the most important day of her daughter's life. I read the message 3 times. I waited for the tears to come. I waited for the crushing weight of grief that had nearly suffocated me when Patrick died. But it did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, light sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a heavy chain finally snapping. For the first time in my life, I realized I did not have to keep holding on to something that had already rotted away. This message was not a punishment. It was a release form. I did not type a reply. I did not beg. I did not try to explain that I was only protecting myself. Instead, I took a screenshot of the message. I opened my email and attached the image, sending it directly to Elaine. I added a simple note. Keep this for me. Elaine. If they ever come back asking for anything, this is the evidence that they voluntarily cut ties. I put the phone down and walked to the sideboard in the hallway. I pulled out the drawer where I kept the sentimental debris of motherhood. There were birthday cards written in crayon, a drawing Lily had made when she was 6 years old, and letters Patrick had written to me during his business trips. I fetched a cardboard box from the garage. Slowly, methodically, I began to sort. I took Lily's things, the cards, the drawings, the photos of her prom, and I placed them into the box. I did not throw them in the trash. That would have been an act of anger. This was an act of closure. I taped the box shut, wrote past on the side with a thick marker, and carried it up to the attic. I left it there in the dark, alongside the old holiday decorations we no longer used. When I came back downstairs, Noah was standing in the kitchen. He had let himself in. He looked tired, his eyes red, as if he had been crying for me. He walked over and pulled me into a hug that felt like it was holding my pieces together. "Mom?" He whispered into my hair, his voice thick. "You did not lose your family. You only lost the illusion of a part of it." I buried my face in his shoulder and finally let out a single, shuddering sob. We sat at the kitchen island until late into the night, drinking tea. Noah told me things he had kept hidden for years. He told me how Lily used to call him, asking him to soften me up before she asked for money. She would say, "Tell Mom you are worried about my rent so she opens the wallet." Noah admitted, staring into his mug. "I never told you because I did not want to break your heart." I reached out and covered his hand with mine. I realized then that the deepest revenge was not stripping Lily of her inheritance. It was simply removing myself from the equation. I was done being the bottomless wallet. I made a silent vow to never check her social media again, to never send another birthday check, to never search for her name. Before I went to sleep, I went to my study and pulled out a dusty file I had ignored since Patrick died. It was a business plan for selling Green Nest Market. We had talked about retiring early, about traveling to the coast, about painting landscapes. I ran my hand over the paper. I was 62 years old, and for the first time in decades, I was not anchored by the false weight of someone else's happiness. I was free. The sale of Green Nest Market took place in a glass-walled conference room that smelled of floor wax and expensive cologne. I sat across from Elaine and a team of financial advisors who looked young enough to be my grandchildren. When the lead evaluator slid the paper across the table, I stared at the number. It was far higher than I had anticipated. The chain of stores Patrick and I had built from a single roadside stand was valued at over $12 million. The brand reputation is impeccable. Maggie, the advisor said, tapping his pen. Clean financials, prime locations. You are walking away with a king's ransom. I signed the preliminary intent to sell with a hand that did not shake. For the first time, the signature felt like it belonged to Margaret, not just Mrs. O'Connor, the business owner. That evening, while sorting through the last of the files in my home office to prepare for the auditors, I knocked over a stack of old ledgers. Behind them, wedged against the back of the shelf, was a battered tin box. I pulled it out and blew off the dust. Inside, the cakes of watercolour paint had cracked with age, but the sketchbook beneath them was preserved. I opened it. The pages were filled with rough, vibrant sketches of rocky coastlines, lighthouses, and churning grey water. They were from a summer in Maine, 40 years ago, before I met Patrick, before the business, before the children. I sat on the floor, tracing the line of a charcoal wave. A name popped into my head. Caroline West. She had been my roommate that summer. A fierce girl who smoked thin cigarettes and swore she would die with a paintbrush in her hand. On a whim that felt dangerously like hope, I opened my laptop and typed her name into the search bar. The first result was a website for the West Gallery in a town called Harbour's Edge, Maine. Her face, lined with wrinkles, but possessing the same piercing blue eyes, stared back at me. I typed an email before I could talk myself out of it. Caroline. It is Maggie, the redhead who used to be afraid of the dark. I think I need to see the ocean. I expected a reply in a week, or perhaps never. The response came in 20 minutes. Maggie, is that really you? If you are still the girl who painted storms like she was angry at the sky, get your butt up here. We have a guest room, and the light in October is a miracle. Come home. I showed the email to Noah the next day over breakfast. He looked at the pictures of the foggy harbour on Caroline's website, then at me. Mum? You have to go, he said, pouring more coffee. I can handle the closing. I can deal with the realtors and the movers. You have spent your whole life making sure everyone else had a roof over their heads. Go find your view. I am 62. Noah, I said, looking at my hands. It seems foolish to run away to art camp. Noah smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. You are not running away. You are just picking up where you left off. 3 days later, I landed in Portland. I rented a car and drove north. The landscape shifted from the urban sprawl into deep, green corridors of pine and spruce. The air here was different. It was heavy with salt and moisture, a stark contrast to the dry, thin air of Denver that I had breathed for decades. When I pulled into Harbour's Edge, the fog was just lifting, revealing a harbour filled with bobbing wooden boats and lobster traps stacked like architectural sculptures. Caroline was waiting on the porch of a weathered grey shingle building. She hugged me so hard my ribs ached. She smelled of turpentine and lavender. Look at you, she said, holding me at arm's length. You look like you have been fighting a war. Maggie, I think I have, I admitted. She led me inside. The gallery was filled with light and the smell of oil paint. A few young students were setting up easels. They looked up, eyeing my expensive business suit and my stiff posture with curiosity. They saw a grandmother, a tourist. They did not know I had just burned my old life to the ground to be here. I rented a small cottage a mile down the road. It had a drafty attic with a skylight that faced the Atlantic. The first night. I lay in bed listening to the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the rocks. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of terror. I was alone in a strange town, thousands of miles from the only home I had known for 40 years. But as the tide went out, the fear receded with it, leaving a strange, vibrating lightness in its wake. My routine became simple. Every morning, I put on an old sweater and went down to the docks. I bought a new set of paints. My hands, used to the clean precision of counting cash and signing checks, were now constantly stained with cerulean blue and burnt umber. Caroline was a tough teacher. She did not coddle me because of my age. "That shadow is lazy, Maggie," she told me one afternoon, pointing at my canvas with a brush. "You are painting what you think a rock looks like, not what is actually there. Look harder. See the purple in the grey." I looked. I squinted against the wind, and for the first time in years, I really saw. I was not just escaping the pain of Lily and Lucas. I was moving towards something. I was remembering the woman I was supposed to be before duty and obligation had rewritten my script. The salt air was stinging my eyes, but my vision had never been clearer. The salt air of Maine had begun to heal the cracks in my spirit. It had been 5 months since I arrived in Harbour's Edge, and my life had taken on a quiet, rhythmic beauty. My paintings, once hidden in dusty attics, were now hanging on the walls of Caroline's gallery. To my genuine surprise, 3 of them had sold for a modest sum. I was no longer just a retired business owner. I was an artist. Then came the call from Noah. His voice was bright, a stark contrast to the grey Atlantic fog outside my window. "It is done, Mom," Noah said. "The sale of Green Nest is finalized. The wire transfer cleared this morning. $12 million is sitting safely in the new trust account." I felt a wave of relief. I was secure. I was free. Or so I thought. The very next morning, an automated email from a bank in Texas shattered my peace. It was a notification regarding a loan application for $200,000, secured against the Austin farmhouse. I stared at the screen. That house transaction had been cancelled months ago. I forwarded the email to Elaine immediately. Her investigation was swift and brutal. By noon, she was on the phone, her voice cold with professional fury. "It was Lucas," Elaine said. "He tried to use the old draft papers from the initial closing. He forged your signature. Maggie. He was trying to rush a loan through a secondary lender before the cancellation fully propagated through the system. But the bank's fraud algorithm caught the discrepancy in the dates. He is desperate." The hits kept coming. Later that afternoon, Noah called again. His tone somber. He told me that word had spread through his friends in Austin. Lily had been fired from her marketing firm. Rumors were swirling that she had been involved in a series of unethical, dirty media campaigns orchestrated by Lucas to skirt advertising regulations. She had not been charged with a crime yet, but she had been quietly let go. She was radioactive in her industry. That evening, a fierce nor'easter slammed into the coast. Rain lashed against the skylight of my studio like gravel. I was mixing a shade of stormy grey when my phone rang. It was Caroline, calling from the gallery down the hill. "Maggie, you need to come down here," Caroline said, her voice tight with confusion. "There is someone here to see you. It is... well, you just need to hurry." I put on my raincoat and drove down the slick, winding road. When I pushed open the door of the gallery, the wind ripped it from my hand. I stepped inside, dripping wet, and froze. Standing in the center of the room, surrounded by my paintings of violent seas, was Lily. She looked like a ghost. Her designer clothes were stained and soaked. Her face was gaunt, the cheekbones protruding sharply beneath skin that looked grey in the gallery light. But she was not alone. Clinging to her chest, wrapped in a damp wool blanket, was a baby. I walked forward slowly. The baby was a girl, perhaps 6 months old, with cheeks flushed red from the cold. Around the infant's neck hung a delicate gold chain with a small letter E pendant. I did not know who E was, but the sight of that innocent child in my daughter's shaking arms stopped my breath. Lily looked up. Her eyes were rimmed with red, filled with a terror I had never seen in her. "Mom," she choked out, her voice cracking. "He left us. Lucas. He took the car. He took the last of the cash. He went to Florida for some investment deal." She began to sob, her body trembling so hard the baby started to whimper. "I have nothing, Mom. Nothing," Lily cried, clutching my sleeve with wet, freezing fingers. "The bank is calling me. The police want to talk to me about the fraud. But I did not know he made me sign things. He told me it was just standard procedure. Please, you have to help me." She looked at me with the desperation of a drowning woman. "I need lawyers, Mom. I need you to fix this," she pleaded, the words spilling out in a rush. "Those things I said at the wedding. That was him? He got inside my head? I never meant it. I swear. I never meant to hurt you." I looked at my daughter. I saw the fear. Yes, I saw the ruin of a life built on arrogance and greed. But I also saw the way she shifted the blame. Even now. It was Lucas's fault. It was the influence. It was never her choice. I looked at the baby, who was staring at me with wide, curious eyes. I stood at the precipice of the oldest trap in motherhood. All I had to do was open my checkbook, make a few calls, and the nightmare would go away. I could save her. I could buy back her love, or at least her gratitude. But then I remembered the laughter in the banquet hall. I remembered the text message telling me to never find them again. Was she a victim? Yes. But she had also been a willing accomplice until the money ran out. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of wet canvas and ozone. I had to decide if I was going to be her mother or her savior. And for the first time, I knew those were two very different things. I invited Lily up to the studio instead of the gallery proper. I closed the heavy door, shutting out the rest of the world. Caroline had brought up a laundry basket lined with soft quilts for the baby, whose name, I learned, was Elise. The little girl was asleep, oblivious to the storm outside or the storm inside. The sound of the rain hammering against the skylight was deafening, creating an atmosphere that felt less like a reunion and more like a private court hearing. Lily sat on a wooden stool, wringing her hands until her knuckles were white. "Mom." "About that text message." Lily started, her voice shaking as she looked at her shoes. I was so angry. You know how I get when I'm stressed. I did not mean it. I was thinking about when I was little. Remember how we used to bake cookies? Remember how you said you would always be there for me? I did not let the nostalgia take root. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the screenshot I had saved months ago, and placed it on the easel ledge between us. The glowing words, "We are done with you," lit up the dim room. This was not an accident. "Lily," I said, my voice steady. It was your truth in that moment, and that truth, It gave me the courage to finally live differently. Lily looked at the screen, then at me, her eyes wide. "I am not going to pay your debts," I said, laying out the terms with surgical precision. "I will not call a lawyer to scrub your record. I will not give you money to buy a house. And I am not putting your name back in the trust." Lily gasped, opening her mouth to interrupt. But I held up a hand. "However," I continued, "I am willing to set up a small education fund for Elise. Noah will be the guardian of that account. It will be used strictly for her schooling when she gets older. That is all." Lily stood up, her face twisting from sorrow into a familiar, ugly rage. "So that is it?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You choose painting. You choose a strange town over your own family. You are just a selfish woman pretending to be noble. You are abandoning us." Her words hit me, but for the first time in my life. They slid off like the rain on the roof. I have lived 60 years making sure everyone else was pleased, even when they treated me like a bottomless wallet. I replied, my tone calm but immovable. "You can call me selfish. If being selfish means refusing to stay in a prison that you built for me, then I accept that." I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out 2 things. The first was a white envelope. The second was a small, postcard-sized print of a painting I had finished the week before, a dark, weathered boat leaving a harbour in the night. "This envelope contains a list of the best bankruptcy attorneys Elaine knows," I said, placing them in her hand. "And this picture is a reminder. You have to row your own boat now. Lily, I can be a distant light for you, but I am not your rescue ship anymore." Lily looked at the items, then snatched her baby from the makeshift crib. She backed toward the door, clutching Elise tight. She turned to me, her face wet with tears and rain. "I will not forgive you for this," she hissed. "I am not asking you to forgive me," I answered softly. "I just hope that one day Elise grows up without having to apologize for the way her mother treated her grandmother." Lily slammed the door. I heard her footsteps fading down the stairs. When the silence returned, I turned back to my work table. I opened a file folder and took out the old blueprints for the Austin farmhouse, the paperwork I had unconsciously carried with me all this way. I took the thick paper and tore it. I tore it into strips, then into confetti. I dropped the pieces into a bowl of water and blue pigment, mashing them until they were nothing but a coloured pulp. I picked up my palette knife, scooped up the mixture, and applied it to the canvas in front of me, building the texture of a rough, churning sea. The next morning, the sun broke through. The sky was a brilliant, washed clean blue. I hung my newest painting in the front window of Caroline's gallery. It showed an old wooden boat, battered but upright, riding a silver wave. I walked out onto the porch and looked down at the harbour. I took a deep breath of the cold, salt air. I realised that the only true revenge was living a life so full and whole that no text message, no matter how cruel, could ever define me again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Maggie's decision. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people.